The next thing we're going to look at is on Moodle, and it is, where did I hide that? Up here under announcements and miscellaneous documents, there's a document called Employee and Employer Payroll Taxes and Caps 2019. And I just want to go over this and tell you what we're going to be using it for and how it's going to serve as a reference in this class. So next week, let's see, no, not next week. On January 29th, we're going to have our first quiz, which is going to be over this tax table as well as all of the acronyms that we've been studying so far. And what that means, an acronym is something that stands for something else, right? Initials. So for example, we've done a whole ton of acronyms like FMLA and ERISA and IRCA and PBGC and OASDI and FICA and FUTA and SUTA, and we've used tons and tons of acronyms. And it's kind of like the language of payroll. So on the 29th, which is I think a week from Tuesday, we're going to have our first quiz. I think it's like 10, 12 points. And it's going to be over these tax tables, which I'm going to explain to you, and then all the acronyms. So Ben actually asked me on Tuesday what was the best way to study for this class, and I gave him an answer for chapter 1 that's probably not going to look like the rest of the chapters, which was, just good old-fashioned flashcards on the acronyms, right? FMLA, flip the card. Family Medical Leave Act, the two things it says is, the 12 weeks for care of, birth or death or health care of spouse, parent, self, etc. And 26 weeks if you're active military, got to keep the health care intact. Only applies to companies 50 plus employees in a 75-mile radius. So the basic 2 or 3 things off the PowerPoint about the Act. No, it's just going to be, I'm just going to give you the acronyms and expect that you can just kind of go bleh. No. No, on a piece of paper. So really studying, so that I feel, because it's just really the guts of payroll, you've got to be able to talk about these acts. Okay. So the tax tables are also acronyms, but they apply to taxes. So let's just go through these. The way that I've got this split up is there's employee taxes are in the 2 columns on the left, and employer taxes are on the 2 columns on the right. And you can see that the first tax is the same on both sides. And we know that both OASDI and HI are both employee and employer taxes. What does OASDI stand for again? Old age, survivors, and disability insurance. Right? So it's old age, which is probably not politically correct anymore. I don't think about myself as being in my old age once I hit 65, but okay. I got an ARP card. You get an ARP card when you turn 50. You know who that is? Yes, the American Association of Retired People. It's like, A, who the hell retires at 50? And B, it's like, I am not old, I'm just 50. Okay, so OASDI, Old Age Survivors and Disability Insurance, 6.2%, and there's a cap on it. It changes every year, and what the cap is once you hit that much of earnings, then you don't pay it anymore. So once you hit $128,700 of earnings in a year, and that can come from lots of different places. I can have a small self-employed business. I can have a couple jobs. You add them all together. If you get over 128.7, you stop paying the 6.2%. Okay. And then your employer matches that. Now, what happens when you're self-employed? So like my little consulting business, say I earn $5,000 on it. I pay 12.4% on that, don't I? Right, because I'm both employee and employer.
When do you wait to start your own business until after you reach that cap?
Right, so say that my W-2, say I'm an attorney, I make 150 grand at my law firm, and then I do some consulting for nonprofits on the side and make another 30,000. Do I have to pay any OASDI on my 30,000 of consulting? I don't, because I made 150 at the law firm. I already hit the cap on my W-2. Does that make sense? Because that's the cap. Once you hit 128.7 with everything put together, you're done. And because the law firm's obviously going to take the 6.2% out up to the 128.7, that next other 30,000 I make consulting, I don't have to pay OASDI on it. Does that make sense? So you can go ahead. Well, I mean, think about people that make, the chairman of GE makes $20 million a year. Okay. There's no way from an actuarial standpoint or from a mathematical standpoint that he could ever retrieve that kind of return. So, do you guys know what I mean when I say something's actuarially sound? It's kind of a mouthful. So what does an actuary do?
To run the numbers.
They do. They make accountants look like we can't add. They have to have a PhD in statistical sciences. And they're the ones that run all the mathematical models behind insurance, workers' compensation, Social Security, anything where we put pools of money into and then expect to be paid out unemployment. Right? Somebody's got to be behind the numbers, crunching everything. There's a reason why 16-year-old boys pay $3,500 a year for car insurance, and I pay $600. Right? It's all based on statistical modeling, right? And the risk of having to pay out based on them. Okay? So OASDI is Social Security. That's one of the many issues facing our government from a financial standpoint is that our Social Security system right now is actuarially sound, but it's not projected to be actuarially sound in the future unless either the cap gets dramatically raised, the tax itself, the percentage gets raised, or the age that you can claim it gets pushed back. Because when it was designed in 1930, what year did it pass? 36? I got 36. And I'm not going to get these numbers exactly right, but you'll get the point. There was something like 12 workers for every retired person, and now there's like 2.8 workers for every retired person. Is that because people are living longer? They're living longer and having less kids. We're not even replacing ourselves. The U.S. population is actually right now stagnant or slightly shrinking. We're not, you think how many people, I mean, I personally know pretty much everybody in my age who had 2 kids. I have a few friends that had 3 kids. Really 2. And in my children's era, they're in their late 20s and early 30s, I'm seeing lots and lots of people in their era either choosing not to have children at all. They're worried about climate change and inequality and social justice and all that stuff. Or they're really into their professions, or it's just too damn expensive. So having 1 kid, and 1 or no kids. So we're not even really replacing ourselves. So what does that do for the actuarial soundness of this whole slew of baby boomers that are retiring?
So like less people are paying into
Of course, and then there's a whole shit ton of us in my age bracket that are getting ready to retire, and it's like, you guys aren't having kids. Who's going to pay for it? So, I mean, to make it actuarially sound, something's got to shift.
As well as it's trying to refix our immigration progress and get good people in here. You know what I mean?
And
So we
I don't know how much the Social Security system, I've never seen anything along that line, how much that's impacts our benefits. I've just never seen anything along those lines. I don't know what the relationship is between immigration and the actuarial soundness.
I'm just saying it needs to happen if we're going to replace ourselves. You know what I mean? Like,
So, do you think that's going to impact our population choices? Or our repopulation choices, I mean?
I mean, maybe. I don't know. We need the economy to get better too, and we need more, not all these people under employed, you know,
Right.
like people with like degrees working at Starbucks, you know.
Right.
So that's another thing that needs to be fixed.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot more interconnectedness in those issues than I probably know how to talk about.
Okay.
From what I understand, looking at employment stats right now and just anecdotally talking to employers around here, anybody at Starbucks, and this is what I can't reconcile in my own mind, there's so many good jobs in Missoula that employers can't fill right now. For example, I have people call me all the time, and this has nothing to do with immigration whatsoever. I have people call me all the time who want bookkeepers, full-time bookkeepers. Starting wage $17 an hour, full benefits. Holy shit, that's a living wage job in Missoula.
Yeah, it's like more makes.
I mean, that's a living wage job in Missoula, Montana. And I can't get people in the door who can get the degree to feed them out the back end to give them to employers. So underemployment, at least here, in my mind, is in no way related to immigration. It's related to, I don't know how to recruit people to come in and make the investment in their education and get out from underneath a $9 an hour job and get into a $17 an hour job.
Okay, right. We need like a cultural shift, you know what I mean? We need people to get back in like trades more.
Yeah.
We need people to get back in.
Well, that's what we do here. We get you in out 2 years. How do I market that? How do I get people in there?
Exactly.
On a different note, Social Security, each year, the amount that it pays out to people, that increases the cost of living amount, correct?
It does, but it doesn't even keep up with inflation. I think this last year, the increase was like 1.1%, inflation was like 3.9.
So just, I don't know if you know, it's the 6.2%, has that gone up
No,
in the last, like?
it's not gone up forever.
Could that be part of what's affecting it then, maybe because the cost of.
Clearly, they've been trying to deal with it by raising the cap every year. The cap goes up a couple grand a year.
When you say, oh, the cap of.
The cap goes up a couple grand a year. I mean, when I first started teaching, this cap was like $89,000.
I just raised the percentage of it.
Well,
Like that.
what do you think the sentiment of this country is around the dirty T word?
But the thing is, it's like, if it's beneficial for them in the long run, and their kids, and you know what I mean, I don't know.
It's also beneficial not to burn our planet up, but that doesn't always be the promise.
That's very true.
You know, I mean, most people, and this is just totally my opinion, are self-serving to the extent that they have a very difficult time thinking long-term if that requires behavior modification today. And that really is the source of pretty much the shit show we have going on right now. Absolutely. And we are taught that is paramount.
I'd rather have $20 now.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then you run into people that are living paycheck to paycheck and have it budgeted in, but this much comes out, and then if they increase that, that can
So it's all tied in. It's all tied in. I mean, people, I think it's like one of the first things Brett said when he walked in is, oh, we're taxed to death here. We're actually taxed at much less rates than most Western countries. Much less rates.
And they're still happier than we are.
We on the Happy Planet Index, we just logged it. Every year we fall a couple notches as a country.
We still.
Yeah, countries like Costa Rica and Panama.
Well, it's because we're so in our heads and out of our bodies. You know what I mean?
I don't. What does that mean? I have no idea what that means.
What that means is people they aren't working out, they aren't being active. I mean, here in Montana, that's different. In
Right.
Indiana, where I'm from,
Right.
we're the fattest city. All everyone does is go out to eat.
Right.
You know, the only place to walk is in front of the river. So there's that.
Or in the mall.
Yeah.
My personal favorite.
Yes, people speed walking in the mall.
Right,
Oh my
right,
God.
right.
And then we're so disconnected socially. You know what I mean? Like people.
But that's the same all over the world. I mean,
True, yeah, true. It's
the
definitely,
disconnect based on technology is pretty,
but not just for you.
um, I just think, so Costa Rica, I've done there a couple of times, and when they greet each other, anybody else ever done that? How do they greet each other? Okay. Well, they say to each other, Pura vida, pure life, happy life. I might be like, you owe me money, and I'm pissed off at you, but you know what I'm going to say first? Pura vida, Joshua. And then I'm going to go on and rail on you like you owe me $50. But I mean, it's a culture based around mutual respect and gratitude. And I mean, it doesn't hurt that it's warm and beautiful and on the ocean and that stuff sucks. But it's not a consumptionistic society, and they're not taught to want instant gratification. It's, a long life of hard work for a little above a subsistence level life. And it's just fine. The other group of people that interestingly are always up in the top 5. So you've got like this cluster that are equatorial countries, second world countries, I would call them. Anybody know where, can speculate where the other cluster of happy people are?
Up north
It's all Scandinavian.
And they have like the highest.
Finland, Denmark, Sweden, I mean, just big, Iceland, just big, right down,
Or everything revolves around like the happiness. Like even when taxes are high, like you get great employment, you get great benefits, leave of absence, you get like, all the benefits.
all that, free education, free health, everybody's got clean teeth.
Yep.
I mean, it's just, But, your lowest tax bracket is 60%. And they all, I mean, I lived in Denmark for 2 years. I about died. I took my first job out of college here in Copenhagen, and my first paycheck, I'm like, holy crap. What happened to 60% of my paycheck? I'm like, oh, yeah, it's our taxes. And I'm like, ugh.
But you survived though.
But of course you survived. I mean, but they, like, young people there don't have a starter house full of Pottery Barn furniture. They more live like communally. I mean, I had like 6 roommates. That's what you do.
It
So,
also
anyways.
probably helps in those countries. It's kind of like you start at a young age focusing on what you're going to do with your life, I feel.
You do. One of the things that's really interesting, which I've actually tried to do here by getting this apprenticeship here, and it came from my model living in Denmark when I was a young person. At 16, you are identified. So there's pros and cons to this, but more pros in my mind. At 16, you're identified as being university bound or trades bound, or neither. So you're going to be, this sounds kind of crass, but you're not going to be very terribly value added to the society, right? So like at 16, it's like you're on a medical track. It looks like you're doctor material. And Jenny, you look like you're going to be an amazing welder. And I look like, I probably am going to be the Starbucks server my whole life. But that's great. There's dignity and respect in all those things. Let's get you on the path. So for the tradesperson, it's really interesting that immediately at 16, they start on what's it called, hoyskolen, where you do a little apprenticing and a little work, or a little apprenticing and a little school, a little apprenticing and a little school. So when you come out as a welder at 24, you've got a full living wage journeywoman job. I mean, it's really, there's no small wonder they're happy. And it's all, you have to worry about how you're going to pay for it.
You do that in Germany too.
It's all over Western Europe. It's all over Western Europe. Who decides what track? It's all based on testing, aptitude. The other thing is their schools are so, their schools are just so different. Like, they have such tight relationships with their teachers that their aptitude and their likes and dislikes and social interactions have been copiously documented their whole lives. So you've always, from the time you were a little girl in kindergarten on up, it's been documented that you have a real love around science and a very curious mind, and you're a caregiver by nature. So all these things point to you would be really great in the medical profession. So it's super awesome. And the other thing, and then we'll go back to this, but is that teachers in Scandinavian countries are the cream of the crop, and they're paid like the cream of the crop.
That's a great idea.
So, and I don't know if any of you guys have ever heard this. Well, I really don't know what I'm going to do, so I'm just going to go into education.
Yeah.
Or I couldn't get into nursing school, so I think I'll just go into education. It's like, oh, awesome. So the poorer performers, and I'm not saying that by any stretch about all teachers, but getting into bachelor's in education in Scandinavia, you have to be like medical school smart. And they're compensated as such. And they're socially elevated as such. K through 12 teachers are like how we treat our bonds tradesmen and our Wall Street.
You want the smartest
Yes.
teaching.
Of course you
Otherwise,
do.
you're just creating mediocre students.
Duh. So it all seems so obvious, but they're collectivists collectivists and we're individualists. We want everything we can take for ourselves and keep our own assets and our own net worth, and we don't want to give our tax money over. So it's just a different society. Okay, HI is another tax that stands for what? Remember that? Health insurance? Medicare, HI.
Health insurance.
Medicare. This one gets a little trickier. There's no cap, 1.45, but there's this additional 0.9% if you earn over $200,000. And by earn, I mean it has to be active earned income, right? So you've got a job or you've got self-employment. It's not like I inherited an obscene amount of money and I'm earning that kind of interest a year. That's called unearned income. You don't have to pay Medicare on unearned income, only earned income. This 0.9% was instituted as part of Obamacare to help the government with the subsidized premiums for health care. So if you make more than $200,000 a year, you don't pay 1.45%, you pay 2.35%. But only on the amount over 200 grand, okay? Not all of it, only on the amount over 200 grand, does it jump up to 2.35, and your employer doesn't match it. Okay? Everyone understand that? Okay, now I'm back on the employee side. FIT stands for federal income tax, and this is actually not correct. Sorry, I didn't get this updated for, thought I looked at this. This is not correct. Our highest tax rate now, tax bracket now, is 37%. Go ahead.
On the HI for the employer,
Yeah,
once you hit $200,000 and your part goes up,
yeah,
does the employer still continue to pay the 1.45?
Yeah.
So they just don't pay the difference?
Exactly.
Okay.
exactly. So federal income tax, the lowest marginal tax bracket is 10%, and the highest is 37, and there's 7 brackets. And this is really important to understand this. It's astounding to me how many people don't know this about their own tax system. We have, in America, a progressive tax system based on highest marginal tax rates. And these numbers aren't going to be correct. It doesn't matter. It's their ballpark, and it's for illustration purposes. So if I'm single, and I need between 0, and again, these numbers aren't right. This is all just about, and around 25 grand a year, I'm going to pay 10% federal income tax, right? And if I jump up to between $25,000 and $38,000 a year, I'm going to pay 12%. And 38, I think this goes up to like around 70. I'm going to jump up to 15. And there's 7 brackets, okay? With the highest one being 37. So here's the misunderstanding. I'm working right now, I've got a job for $24,000 a year, I'm paying 10%, and I have an opportunity to get a job at $30,000 a year. Does that mean now all of my $30,000 is taxed at 12%? No. No matter how much money you make, I could make $1 million a year, and my first $25,000 is going to be taxed at 10%. And that next 13 grand is going to be taxed at 12%. And the next, whatever that is, 32 grand is going to, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That is what's called a progressive tax system. People I talk to all the time, tax clients, they're like, I don't want to take that rate because now all my money is going to be taxed at, this next higher rate. No, it's not. Just those next dollars of income are going to be taxed. That's called a marginal tax rate. Okay? Everyone understand that?
Are you recording this one?
I am. I don't know that I love all my social commentary on tape, but okay.
You're referencing a lot of different things.
Huh?
You're mentioning a lot of new things.
Yeah. So yeah, this is your highest marginal tax bracket. State income tax works exactly the same way. In Montana, we have 6 tax brackets, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6%. And it looks just like this. The numbers aren't the same, the salary ranges aren't the same. But same exact concept. And Montana's about right in the middle as far as our income tax bracket goes. Some states, quite progressive states like California, for example, their state income tax rates, I think their highest marginal rate's like 8.8%. And some states have no income tax at all. So how do they raise revenue if they have no income tax? Sales tax and property tax. I mean, everybody's got to raise, governments have to raise revenue somewhere, right? Okay, so what I need you to know about this is really basically what I just said about the 4 taxes on the left. What does an employee pay? All employees pay OASDI and HI. Stop paying OASDI at 128.7, and you pay an extra 0.9 of HI if you make over 200 grand. If you're pretty low income and you don't have any taxable income, so for example, I've got a job, let's say I make $12,000 or $10,000 a year, right? That's what my W-2 says. Am I going to pay income tax to the feds? Why not? My standard deduction is going to be greater than 10 grand. That's something everybody gets. If you're single, you get 12,000 bucks. If you're married filing jointly, you get 24. And there's some other filing statuses I'm not going to go into. But if I'm single and I've got a $10,000 W-2 and I have a standard deduction of $12,000, I've got no taxable income. So I don't pay federal income tax. And we're going to talk about this when we get further down the road. I'm going to indicate that on my W-4, I don't want my employer taking income tax out of my paycheck if they don't have to. I could use that money on a weekly basis. Yeah.
Is that impacted by marriage still?
It is. That number doubles if you're married. It goes from 12,000 to 24,000.
But what my question was is like if my spouse only earned $9,000, she's still going to get taxed on that because jointly
Yes.
are.
Yeah. Yeah. You're correct in what you're saying. Okay, so those are the 4 taxes for employees. Then over on the right-hand side, the 4 taxes for employers. You go to 1250, 150.
Yeah.
And over on the employer side, OASDI and HI are just straight up matches. Other than what? The 0.9% if you make more than 200,000. You do. Yep. You need to remember the cap numbers, the rate ranges. And that's just like kind of 101 to this class. It's like learning the alphabet and sounds if you're sitting in an Italian class. You make out the new sounds. This is like the language of people. FUTA and SUTA, Federal Unemployment Tax Act, State Unemployment Tax Act. FUTA is only paid by the employer. And you're never going to see that taken out of your paycheck. It's an employer tax. It's really small. It's 0.6%. On your calculator, that goes on 0.006. And the cap is only 7 grand per person per year. So if you guys all work for me, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 of you all work for me, and I paid you each $50,000 a year, can you please calculate for me what my food bill would be? So you guys all work for me, I pay you each 50 grand a year. What is my food bill going to be for all of you? I pay each of you 50 grand. I'm going to put this on the, let's, oh, let me see if I can find a piece of paper that doesn't have writing on the back. So the cap's 7,000, right? $7,000 times 0.006. So I think it's going to be $42 per employee. right? Because I pay each of you 50,000, so you've all capped. And there's 10 of you.
I was thinking the cap was 7,000. That's the max.
The cap is also another term for cap is wage base.
So after $7,000.
Just done.
Hour income.
Yep. No. So try this one. You guys all work for me. There's 10 of you. 5 of you make $5,000 a year, and the other 5 of you make $50,000 a year. That's my FUTA. 5 of you make $5,000 a year, and the other 5 of you make $50,000 a year. That's my FUTA. So the 5 people. What's that, 220? Right, so 5 of you cap, and 5 of you, I only pay up to 5,000 because that's all I pay you, right? 30 times 5, 150. So 220 and 150, I think my total food is going to be 370. Is that right? Thank you. So if you make less than the cap, in this illustration, obviously I only pay food on what I pay you. If you make more than the cap, I pay it on $7,000. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's how FUTA works. Do you pay in or do I just pay in? Just me. And what is FUTA again? Federal Unemployment Tax Act, and that's administered by the IRS. Is that where you get your unemployment benefits from? No, that's from SUTA. Where was I? There we go. Which is this guy. SUTA is a tax that I pay as the employer. And it's got a wide range of rates depending upon what kind of business you're in, how much turnover you have, how much unemployment you paid out, whether you're a surplus or deficit employer. We'll learn a whole bunch about that. But for right now, what you need to know is you could have a really, really low rate, like 1%. You can have a really high rate, like 6.1%. And the cap's pretty significant here. It's $32,000 a year. Okay. This you need to just print out and memorize. You will use this over and over and over and over and over. It's imperative that you know it. Okay? All right, let me do, and that'll be part of the acronym quiz on the 29th. So these will be some of the acronyms. And then there'll be some non-tax acronyms like ERISA. But you can't just tell me what it stands for. You've got to tell me what is OASDI, what is HI, what is FUTA, what is SUTA, and the cap, and the rate, and who pays it. 29th, week from Tuesday. It's like 12 points, but you need to know it because it's going to set the stage for the whole class. For sure. Okay. Let's, God bless, take a look at chapter 2. And I will hide the solutions and hide those other lectures because okay. So chapter 2, the end of it's really calculation intensive. I think I said this on the first day of school, to make sure to bring a mechanical pencil. You never want to do these calculations in pen. I'm very methodical in how I show you how to go through the steps. So you want to bring a calculator and a pencil, and we'll start into that on Tuesday. Today, I just want to give you an introduction to Chapter 2 in the last 15 minutes. And then I will send you on your way. I can't believe it's already, and you know we don't have school on Monday already. 3-day weekend. There's a really cool annual celebration put on by a number of organizations in Missoula, the Jeanette Rankin Peace Center and the ACLU and a bunch of organizations at Karis Park at 5 o'clock on Monday. There's music and some keynote speakers, and it's just really a beautiful ode to Dr. Martin Luther King. Have you been?
No, I said, I'm going, that sounds fun.
It's I mean, it's just, it kind of gives you, re-energizes some hope.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he was a really hopeful guy,
He was.
you know.
I read all about his story.
One of his favorite quotes of mine is, the most compelling question we must each ask ourselves is, what are you doing for others? I mean, it's so simple. Like, what did I do today for somebody else? That's back to that instant gratification thing.
We're stuck in our head, too. That's amazing.
Okay, there you go. I'm going to start using that term, Rhett.
True. True.
Great conversation. I love great conversations, but we also have to cover exciting things like computing wages and salaries. Okay, we're going to look more at the FLSA, Fair Labor Standards Act. We're going to, it doesn't seem like how much can you talk about number of hours worked, but there's quite a bit to say there. And we're going to look at records, calculating regular and overtime pay, and then all sorts of different kinds of compensation plans. Most of us maybe have a history just getting paid like hourly or salary, but there's all sorts of things like discretionary and non-discretionary bonuses. There's piece rate, there's commission, there's incentive pay. So there's all sorts of different ways to compensate people based upon what your corporate objectives are or your entity's objectives.
For differential
Differential pay is a comp scheme, absolutely. So we're going to talk about all that and calculate them. Okay, so Fair Labor Standards Act, do you guys remember about what era that was? Is that a new or an old law? Old. 38. In fact, it's 80 years old this year. Okay, Fair Labor Standards Act. And it basically, well, we're going to look at that in a second. So the way that it's written is there's two kinds of coverage. You can be covered as an enterprise, in other words, your whole organization has to comply with it, or you can be covered individually. And so enterprise coverage is all employees for the organization if the company is involved in interstate commerce. In other words, anything crosses state lines. Raw materials coming in, final product going out, that's interstate commerce. So if you cross state lines and you have more than $500,000 in gross sales, you have to comply with the enterprise provisions of the Fair Labor Standards Act. Now, many nonprofits, schools, civic organizations, churches, etc., have to comply with it, even though their sales they don't have a sales volume because they're nonprofit, right? How do nonprofits generally raise money? Donations, grants, what else? One more time. Bake sales. They can sell a product. We call that in accounting speak unrelated business income, UBI. I'm trying to fund a volleyball team, so I'm selling cupcakes. That's UBI, unrelated business income. Or they can be a membership organization like Five Valleys Land Trust has members. I'm a member of it, right? So I pay an annual fee to be a member of Five Valleys Land Trust, right? Or they can provide services, right? So Loyola charges tuition to provide school that helps feed the coffers of the Catholic Church system in Missoula, right? So there's a lot of different things nonprofits can do, but they don't talk about annual sales volume, do they? So they're covered under the Fair Labor Standards Act regardless because they don't have sales per se. Okay, if you're not covered under the enterprise coverage, you may still be covered under the individual coverage provisions, which means you're in some sort of ancillary endeavor. What do they call it here? Fringe occupation. A fringe occupation. So I work for DeLine Box, and I make boxes that package flathead cherries that go over state lines. That's a fringe occupation. I'm going to be individually covered. Many small family businesses are exempt from Fair Labor Standards Act. What does that mean? Hey. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that under
some employees.
Yeah, they don't comply with either of these. They're not in interstate commerce, or they don't do 500 grand a year, right? So I'm a little peach farmer, you know, in Dixon, or cantaloupes, I guess is what comes from Dixon. And I pick my cantaloupes and I sell them out by the side of the road. We go back and forth to the Flathead a lot in the summer, and a lot of times we'll take that road, and that's exactly what they're doing. And the cantaloupes don't travel out of state, and the seed doesn't come from out of state, and they certainly don't do any 500 grand. Do they have to comply with the Fair Labor Standards Act? No, they don't. Which means, oh, I guess I should go back and go do this. Okay, so this is all just, I guess, legalese. It defines an employer and an employee. I guess the important thing on this slide is that common law relationships. So we act like an employer and an employee, right? That's a common law relationship. It's like you might hear that a lot with marriage. You know, we've been living together for 35 years. We have kids. We bought a house. We've invested in a business together, but we've never actually, you know, gone to the courthouse and taken the blood and stamped the piece of paper. We have a common law relationship, right? Everybody perceives us to be that, and we perceive each other to be married. And then if the IRS comes in to challenge the employee-employer relationship, which I'll talk about why they would do that, they're going to look at three things. And you really need to dial into this last bullet because you're going to be hearing these three things for the next 15 weeks. The IRS is going to come in and say, so say that Josh is contesting his relationship with me. I'm saying he's an independent contractor, and he says he's an employee. First off, why would I want to classify him as an independent contractor rather than an employee? I don't have to pay those matching taxes. I don't have to pay the 6.2 or the 1.45. I don't have to pay FUTA or SUTA or workers' comp or put him on my health insurance system or match his 401k contributions, right? I'm just going to pay him $20 an hour. You worry about all that on your own, which is fine if he's truly an independent contractor. But if the IRS comes in and I have behavioral control over him, you show up at 8:30 on Monday mornings, and this is how you dress, and this is what you do, and here's the policies and procedures you follow to engage in your tasks, I've got behavioral control over you. Okay, financial, go ahead.
So with FedEx, I know that they use contractors to do.
Some stuff.
Routes and stuff,
Mhm.
but yet they have to comply by those standards, so would they not fall under contractors?
So there, I have to tell you, and this has just got to be corporate attorneys at their finest. There's a couple examples that make absolutely no sense to me whatsoever that they're classified as independents. The folks that deliver the Missoulian are classified as independent contractors. How does that work? I mean, pick up the paper here, deliver it there, and it's got to be on everybody's doorstep by 4:35 a.m. How much more behavioral control can you have? But what they do is they make them buy the papers, and the Missoulian bills me, and I pay the Missoulian. I don't understand, but there's obviously Lee Enterprises has got an attorney that's gotten their mail deliverers or their paper deliverers, carriers, classified as independents. I don't understand how FedEx gets away with that either. In no way, shape, or form does that make sense to me.
Because if the newspaper carriers were employee-based, the company would be expected to pay for their gas.
Or reimburse them for mileage. Right, but so that's just part of your business model. I mean, if I hire you all, so what's an example of a true independent contractor? Somebody that what?
Like outside sales.
Yeah, they have a lot of clients. What else? What's one more time?
Like a hairdresser, some places.
Okay, so but what makes a hairdresser independent?
They buy their own product.
They buy their own product. They find their own clients. They make their own decisions. They pay their own expenditures, right? At the end of the day, as an employee, can you ever be in the hole? In other words, can you incur a loss as an employee?
Oh, no.
Not as an employee. I can't ever come to work here and go home at the end of the day and have less net worth than when I came here, right? well, that's not a true statement either, because the stock market goes crazy every day, but from my job,
You might
right?
have more.
Yeah, right. Shh. But can that happen like in my tax business?
Yes.
Sure, I way underbid. My software is super expensive. I don't get enough clients. I advertise, pay more in advertising than I bring in. Yeah, of course I can incur a loss doing that. Okay, that's the difference. So when we're talking about who the Fair Labor Standards Act applies to, it's got to be somebody that I have behavioral control, financial control, and a perceived relationship with. Independent contractors are not covered under FLSA. And the thing on this slide, and then we'll call it a day, that I want to point out, is there's something called statutory non-employees. What the heck does that mean to you? What's statutory? One more time. By law. Statutes are codification of laws, right? It's taking a law and codifying it, putting it in a big binder. I don't know what it means. It means that they're law. They're bound by law. So statutory non-employees is, in no situation can the following people be called employees. They're always independent. And direct sellers, nobody does this anymore, but when I was a little girl, people came knocking on your door. Yeah, Avon, the Fuller Brush Man, the vacuum. What was the vacuum? Kirby vacuum guy. The Swanson guy in his truck. Like that was a really big deal when I was a little kid. I mean, there was a ding dong, somebody selling you something, right? I mean, get the hell off my porch now. 12-gauge shotgun waiting on the other side around here. And licensed real estate agents are never considered employees. Okay, so we will pick back up with this on Tuesday. Happy Martin Luther King Day. You should get a hold of the book and probably read about the first half of it, first half of chapter 2.
So are all homework centers doing Thursdays then, or?
No, that's not really a true statement either.
Okay. Well, because we have a homework center for this chapter, so I didn't know when you wanted that to be.
Your homework for this chapter will be due on the 29th
Okay.
because it takes a couple full days to get through it.
Okay.